Welcome to a journey that will take you into the depths of imagination and beyond. I'm excited to introduce myself to you. I am author A.L.McCarroll, the creator of the Into the Void Trilogy. It's an honor to be here with all of you. Before we embark on this audio adventure together, I want to take a moment to share a personal story with you. Writing has always been something I've been drawn to ever since I was a child with a love for reading and Goosebumps books. But for me, it hasn't always been an easy journey. I've faced my fair share of challenges, from being dyslexic to having anxiety. Yet, here I am before you now, ready to bring you The Pawn, and eventually the entire Into the Void trilogy. Why? Because I believe our challenges don't define us. They shape us into who we were meant to be, they fuel our determination, and push us to overcome and progress. So my dear listeners, I invite you to join me on this thrilling adventure. Together, let's conquer the unknown, defy the odds, and discover the power of resilience. Let's begin our journey into the void. Chapter 1. When evil touches you, it does change you, but it will never own you. The location of the hidden bunker door came to her in a vivid dream. However, scientist Guinevere Matthews hadn't been prepared for what she would find inside. The entrance to the small bunker was hidden in the Old World Museum on planet Gaia. Guinevere had been to the museum once as a child, attending with a group of other brilliant-minded children from her boarding school. She hadn't stepped foot into the museum since then. She had been too busy for these kind of leisurely activities and didn't subscribe to the notion of dreams leading you to hidden doors. Guinevere was always firmly grounded in logic, but her thoughts kept nagging at her all morning while she worked on a new project. She eventually gave in when her efforts in her lab became hindered due to her distracted thoughts. She took a ground shuttle back to the Old World Museum, which stored relics of planet Gaia's past. It was built around what remained of an old world house that had survived the planet-wide destruction nearly a millennia ago. Guinevere hoped that by going to the museum and confronting what her reoccurring dreams showed her, she could shake off what was keeping her from doing her best at work. Guinevere would have overlooked her newest discovery if it weren't for the GCOM, short for Gwentech Communication Band, catching a signal from the hidden door. The device was a cuff on her left wrist with a curved glass screen. She had invented and distributed it through her company Gwentech. It was intended to be an easy form of communication between each of the inhabited planets and moons. She could hear a light beep come from her GCOM, and on its screen an indicator that showed her getting closer to her target. Once she was on top of it, the beeps came faster and louder. Guinevere stood before a mostly empty old world wall. The only thing that was on it was a glass frame containing a handwritten quote on yellowing paper. The part of the museum that was the old world house smelled musty, which was strange to her because she spent most of her time in immaculately clean tech laboratories. The smell of dust from the preserved walls with their odd-looking material made her sniffle. Guinevere rubbed her nose and read the words on the yellow paper through watering eyes. The planet known as Gaia was born of destruction, fire, and mistakes. What was left of the old we used like a cocoon in the hopes to emerge as something better. Daniel Tari. What she did next would have gotten an ordinary citizen arrested. Discoveries need to be made, she thought to herself confidently as she reached out and lifted the glass frame from the wall. It was either heavier than she imagined, or being a short, petite woman wasn't helping her keep up with typical physical demands. Guinevere sat the frame down away from the wall, and as she did, she caught a glimpse of herself in the reflected glass. She looked tired. Her brown eyes were marked with deep, dark circles. Maybe the long nights in the lab triggered the strange dream, she pondered. Her short, curly ginger hair was matted up in a bird's nest. It needed to be brushed and trimmed. Surely that must be it. She knew that drifting into a light sleep could increase her problem-solving power. She must have already known about this hidden door, maybe from when she was here as a child. She could just have pushed it into the back of her mind, where it could only bubble up in her resting hours. Guinevere laughed as she pulled out a cutting tool from her lab coat. Who was she kidding with resting hours? She usually only took an hour to sleep, and had a nasty habit of staying awake for days while on an exciting venture. The tool sent out a small beam that burned a precise line down the side of the empty wall. The smell of burning drywall caught the attention of the museum guard once she had cut a good-sized line down the left portion of the wall. She heard his footfalls as he ran her way. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" The man's words caught as she turned and eyed him. "Dr. Matthews, I didn't know you would be here," the man stammered. "It's all right." Guinevere took a second to read his name tag as she spoke, but otherwise willingly ignored the man. "Tony, I suspect my actions have surprised or alarmed you. For that I apologize, but I really must continue my work." Guinevere lifted the cutting tool back to the wall, guiding the laser back along the cut line, only pausing to speak curtly over her shoulder towards the guard. "Oh, Tony, you're not to call me doctor. I've never liked that. Miss Matthews will do." She said all this while burning a hole down the wall, the smell becoming increasingly noxious. "Ma'am, you're gonna have to stop," Tony spoke with fragile determination. Ignoring him, she continued to cut. Didn't he realize it must be important if she was doing this? The sound of him tapping out a message on his G-com he wore on his left wrist reached her ears. She could see him in her peripheral vision. She stopped what she was doing, knowing he must have just summoned more help. Guinevere turned off and put down the cutting tool, turning to look at the ridiculous man. He wasn't exactly a man, though, more like a young adult. The guard must have been in his early 20s, if even that. She noticed he had a blue tint to his dark-colored hair and skin. How progressive of a museum on Gaia to hire an altered. "Tony, I'm close to making a discovery here, in this museum." She spoke to him with the tone of a teacher would take with a student. "Do you want to be a part of that, or do you want to hinder my efforts?" He looked at her like he was trying to decide what he would do, and the fact that his thought processed things so much slower than hers felt like an annoying glitch in a code. She wanted to turn around and continue what needed to be done. Still, she tactfully knew that would be the wrong move, so she waited impatiently for the man to pull his thoughts together. Miss Matthews." Tony stumbled over his words. "I know you're used to doing what you want, but we have rules here, ma'am. I can't just let you do this. Did you even contact the management or the curator to see if they would be okay with, well, this?" Tony made a sweeping gesture to the line cut through the wall behind her. Guinevere turned and looked at her handiwork. Damn, she thought, defeated. "No, it slipped my mind. I'll contact them later today, arrange a better time to return." She began walking past Tony, hoping to escape before being thrown out. The smell of his cologne mixed with dust made her nose itch like crazy. "You should have thought about going through the proper channels instead of just doing what you wanted," she mentally scolded herself as she slinked past the dark blue man. She could hear Tony scoffing as he pointed down at his G-com. Guinevere had wanted to get past him and out of the building before he could say anything, but unfortunately, she just wasn't that lucky. "You know, Miss Matthews, for the inventor of all this handy communication, you sure don't seem like you're all that good at communicating." He laughed at his joke. The ridiculous blue-tinted man laughed well at his equally absurd joke. Guinevere Matthews had invented the most complex form of communication that bridged the gap between planets, the universal transmitters that connected the G-coms. Still, she couldn't remember something as simple as to write the museum owner because of a blinding obsession over a lingering dream. She really needed to get a grip. Guinevere fussed at herself as she exited the museum and returned to work. Guinevere took a moment to sit at her black metal desk in her office at Quintech. Then she let out an audible sigh of irritation. Covering her ass had always been a part of her job that she hated, but doing it for nearly 10 years gave her plenty of honed skills. On a large desktop screen, Guinevere mirrored her GCOM. She worked on and sent out a well-written apology with all the necessary niceties. She knew the dance all too well and would always do what she needed to progress her efforts, even if it came down to using illegal means. You had to be willing to take risks to become the owner of the most significant scientific and medical company in the known system. Her company, Gwentech, housed laboratories that created most of the medication and tech for the inhabited worlds and moons. An unfamiliar voice broke Guinevere's thought. "Here's your coffee, Miss Matthews." It was a man's voice, deep and smooth. She could smell a pleasant mix of rich cedarwood and sweet bergamot. A plain white mug of black coffee was set down next to her right side, and lent its smell to the mix. The cup had been held by an arm covered by a standard white lab coat. She shot a quick look at the person who had delivered the drink. It was a younger man, in his 20s, with dark blue eyes and natural black hair. She studied him for a second. He was tall, with broad shoulders and striking features. He was admittedly very handsome for a man his age. The patch on his chest spelled out Dr. Silver in black stitching. This man was a doctor within Gwentech, and not just a cafeteria worker. "You're not the usual deliverer?" she questioned, her fingers hovering over the keyboard in front of her. The man raised his eyebrows and gave a sly smirk and a shrug. "I use this as a chance to meet you. My name's Marcus Silver." Guinevere assessed his attitude as he spoke. She thought he seemed a little pompous. "Thank you for the coffee, Dr. Silver. I'm sure you have work to do." She caught his brief look of defeat before he regained composure. "Sure thing, Miss Matthews. I'll be seeing you around the labs." She heard his footsteps as he walked away. Guinevere finished the message she was typing and sent it. When she was done, she stopped and drank the coffee. Dr. Silver was at least good for something. The coffee had just the right amount of sweetener. Guinevere heard a familiar woman's voice as she continued her work on the screen. "Wow, Gwen, I saw that cutie that just brought you coffee. Did you already break his heart?" Guinevere could see the bright, long blonde hair in her peripheral vision before she even turned to look. It was her best friend, Dr. Daisy Ray. They had been friends since they were kids and had attended the same boarding school for brilliant-minded children. Guinevere had invented the GCOM, and they had gone planet to planet to set up the universal transmitters. In those days, Daisy had studied the people of the different worlds. Daisy became her second in command at Gwentech. She had helped Guinevere create and manage the company. Daisy went on to become the head of cryogenics, inventing the first fully functional cryogenic stasis containers to preserve life in case of a new world destruction event. "You know me too well. Never had time for all that," Guinevere stated plainly as she turned to acknowledge her friend. Daisy smiled and shrugged. "Well, Gwen, we're not getting any younger, so I say go for it." She glared into Daisy's blue eyes with unmasked frustration before quickly returning to her work. She could hear Daisy sigh dramatically. "All right, Gwen, if you change your mind, I'm always here for you. Also, I have the monthly reports." She could see Daisy set a stack of papers next to her. "See you around, Gwen." Daisy walked out of the open office door. Guinevere couldn't help but to think over Daisy's words. Daisy, who had recently turned 30, had become obsessed with finding the one, a silly romantic concept. She had seen her friend play the field over the years, but Daisy's focus was shifting to settling down. Daisy was beautiful and confident, often taking the lead in matters that would have needed Guinevere to speak to others. She did not doubt that Daisy would find a suitable partner. Guinevere, on the other hand, being 5 years older than Daisy, with no dating experience, felt like she wouldn't ever get to the same point as Daisy. She really didn't need that kind of drama. Her company and projects were the most important thing in her life, she thought to herself. They kept her plenty busy and gave her enough fulfillment for more than one lifetime. Guinevere paused at the thought, questioning herself. That's not true. She knew she was, even now, masking feelings of deep loneliness. Guinevere walked up to her office door, closing and locking it. She returned to her desk, her thoughts drifting back to her parents. She settled into her chair and raised her comm to eye level. Guinevere wondered how they were doing, and if they were safe and healthy. and hoped they could give her some guidance to help ease her worries. She called her parents and smiled warmly as she saw the pair pop up over her comm screen. She didn't keep many people close, but her parents were always there for her when she needed them. Guinevere just wished they could be there in person to hug her. She could definitely use a hug right now. When Guinevere became a big name in the system, she worried about their safety and well-being after they received death threats. She had them change their names and move them to another megalopolis across the ocean from where she lived and worked. Guinevere made the trip once a year to visit them during the holidays. She loved them both dearly. Their safety was indeed the most important thing in her life. The following week was a flurry of projects and deadlines. People kept getting in her way and under her skin. Guinevere fussed at a guard that she had bumped into in the hallways, a chubby middle-aged man with a tag that said Fletcher in a militant font. He had been very polite as he was reprimanded. Guinevere felt embarrassed at her overreaction. She thought it over that night as she drifted to sleep. The dreams hadn't let up. How the heck was she going to be able to function with the weight of this keeping her from doing her best productive thinking? Every time Guinevere fell asleep on a tabletop or her fold-out cot, she had the same vivid visions. Guinevere would see the door in the museum exposed and ready to be opened. She could smell the dusty air and feel the cold metal in her hand, but she would wake up before seeing what was inside. Every time this happened, she grew increasingly incensed. Guinevere felt like the time she could be working was wasted with the biological function of sleep. If she could, she would just go without it altogether. Guinevere woke from one of the same teasing dreams in a lab where she had been working. She rolled her wrist over towards her face. The screen of her comm on her left wrist lit up the workbench she had fallen asleep on. The bright light made her squint her eyes. The metal parts strewn across the work table caught the glow of her comm screen and reflected the light in various directions around her. Guinevere grumbled to herself as she checked for new messages. She shifted through all the usual things. Fan mail. People loved the convenience of the technology and helpful medications Gwentech provided. Hate mail. People were fickle and always wanted more or less of something. Guinevere learned quickly that you could never make everyone happy. She knew the labs did their best. That was all the general public could ask for. The last type of typical message was suggestions for improvement from random citizens. She treated these as if she was a silent god. Guinevere noticed a few business correspondence that would need to be dealt with soon. Still, this hunt was for a reply to the message she sent asking to be allowed to continue her work at the museum. Unfortunately, it had been over a week, so she searched the name of the museum to find any newer messages. There it was. She excitedly opened the message. Seriously? Guinevere loudly barked the word into the dark room. The hour was late, and all the workers had gone home for the night. Guinevere usually worked as much as it took to get a job done, but she never demanded the same drive from the others around her. This was her passion. She was married to this work, and if she could live forever, it would never be enough time to do everything she wanted. Guinevere cursed under her breath. In the message, her request had been denied. We will not need your assistance because the newly found door will become our new exhibition. It will be named The Door to Our Past. Our head curator has decided it would be worth more to us to leave it closed in case it contains something dangerous to the other relics in the building. Guinevere turned the device away from her face. She massaged her temples, trying to think of a resolution for her problem. But she was coming up with nothing, and it all seemed like a loss. Hey, this is A.L.McCarroll. Thank you so much for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. Remember to give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, also turn on notifications so you never miss a chapter. Don't forget to follow me on my social media platforms for updates. You can find the links in the description box. Thank you again for watching. Stay tuned and take care.